Good morning and welcome to Houston Oasis. We are glad to have you here with us this morning for our virtual gathering. Houston Oasis is a secular community that meets weekly here in Houston, Texas. But wherever you are this morning, you're at the right place. Core values include two: people are more important than beliefs. They include more than two, they include five. But people are more important than beliefs, and meaning come from making a difference are just two of those. And so if those sound like good things to you, then you are at the right place. Every week we gather together for great music and a great speaker, and this week is no different. We are excited to welcome two musicians with us this morning, Corey and Armin. Corey has been performing jazz music as well as other types of music around the Houston area for more than half his life. He recently collaborated with a very talented guitar player from Russia named Armin Movsesyan. Corey and Armin are grateful for any ways to perform in these crazy times because the music must go on, and the music will go on here this morning at Houston Oasis. Let us welcome Corey and Armin. You guys should be ready to go. I should mention, guys, you might have to unmute yourself on your end. Sometimes Zoom does this, so walk over and just click the button there and see if it unmutes you. You guys can hear me? Hold on, not yet. Hey, Corey, see if you hit the unmute button on your end and see if it allows you to unmute yourself. Or Armin, yeah. There we go. We can hear you guys. Go for it. You guys are on. Excellent job, guys. There are lots of claps and jazz hands going on our Zoom, and we're going to try something new. I brought along a studio audience. Lots of people cheering and clapping for you today. We'll hear a little bit more from Corey and Armin a little bit later in our gathering, but we are excited right now to dive into our main talk with Dr. Gretchen LaSalle. Dr. Gretchen LaSalle is a board-certified family physician. She completed her medical school training at the Tulane University School of Medicine and her residency at the Oregon Health and Science University. And she has practiced at MultiCare Rockwood Clinic in Spokane, Washington for the last 13 years. Vaccine advocacy came as a natural extension of her passion and preventive care. She is an active writer and public speaker on the topic, and in October 2019, published a book titled Let's Talk Vaccines, a clinician's guide to addressing vaccine hesitancy and saving lives. And so we're going to talk vaccines. Houston Oasis, let's welcome Dr. Gretchen LaSalle.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. I was trying to scroll through and look at all your faces to find Lindsay. Is it Cheatham? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Is she here with us today?
I don't know if I see Lindsay. I see Brian.
Okay, hopefully she'll pop in. We're gonna talk, we'll do a talk about vaccines today, and I'm gonna switch over to our slide share, if you'll bear with me for just a minute. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Technology, I'm still learning. Copy the Zoom. Okay, can we see it? I think so. Okay, so alrighty. So we're going to talk about vaccines today, and I'll start by just telling you a little bit about how I happened upon this journey of mine of vaccine advocacy, and then how I found my way to you guys today, which is primarily through Lindsay. So I'm hoping to get to meet her, sort of, and then we'll talk a little bit about the world we're living in, the COVID-19 world, and how that impacts our thoughts about vaccines. The objectives today of my talk is to really talk about what vaccine hesitancy is and where we stand with it. I'll talk both nationally, but also about your particular region there in Houston, and then why it matters. And then again, I wasn't sure when I was preparing this talk if people were going to be a little COVID-19 weary, or if we would want to talk about this a little bit, but we'll talk about how it's really giving us all a hint of what life is like without vaccines, and talk a little bit about my hopes for the future going forward, and a COVID vaccine hopefully coming our way. And then it sounds like question-wise, you guys do a little breakout session and then come back, and we'll have time for questions. So I'll be with you the whole time. Okay, so what is vaccine hesitancy? First of all, I think it's important to note that the term anti-vaccine, it does not include all the spectrum of people that are out there. It is a spectrum like anything in life, and we've got people who accept all vaccines and people who refuse all vaccines. And the group that are called vaccine hesitant or vaccine questioning are really those that are in the middle. They're people who probably had vaccines growing up themselves, but they may have heard scary stories, and they just have had a grain of doubt planted into their minds. They might be people who accept some vaccines, but not others, or they accept them all, but they really haven't had their questions answered, and may have a little bit of doubt. So it's really that middle group that I'm working with. The folks that refuse all vaccines, again, not that they're a homogenous group, but the ones that are really vocal online, on social media. There's, our efforts at trying to change their minds often fall short and just result in frustration for all of us. And so really it's the folks who just need to get some questions answered in order to feel confident in their decision that I am aiming my efforts towards. So with respect to vaccine hesitancy, where we stand in the country, this is a heat map from a study done by Peter Hotez, which you guys might be familiar with. He's from Houston. He's a vaccine researcher and works with neglected tropical diseases, but he's a big vaccine advocate. And so he did a study. This was back in looking at rates of non-medical exemptions. So those are your religious or philosophical exemptions, and looking at the counties across the nation between 2016 and 17 that had the highest rates of exemptions, and therefore lower rates of vaccination. And there's definite hotspots where you guys are in Texas, where I am in the Pacific and inland Northwest. Spokane is on the east side of Washington State, right next to the Idaho Panhandle, and you can see that dark red is our really high rates of non-medical exemptions. So we live in areas where this is a big issue. He also looked at metropolitan areas, and he defined those as cities with more than 400 total non-medical exemptions for those kindergarten vaccines. And you can see Houston comes in at number 7, and to the west of me, Seattle, Portland area are up there, and then Spokane, where I am, rounds out the top 15, which is a dubious distinction to be sure. Not something I'm happy about. But so where we live, anti-vaccine sentiment and hesitancy are a big deal. And this is looking more specifically at Texas. And you can see through the years over 2010 to 2019, where they looked at these rates of conscientious or non-medical exemptions, rates are on the rise. More significantly, that red dotted line is private schools, but public schools as well. And that is a problem. How are we doing success-wise? So those are the problems we're seeing. Our successes, or your successes, excuse me, in your area, excuse me. This came from your public health data, and I couldn't find the kindergarten level of vaccinations. I can only find the vaccine rates from ages 0 to 24 months. But if you look at this graph, and then down below at the little bottom section, you'll see that actually for those vaccines that are given up through age 24 months, and you can see which ones those are at the bottom of the bar graph, Houston is doing better than average. The average is 68.5% immunizations, and Houston is at 73.7%, which is good. But I see that as an opportunity, because really we, to provide herd immunity, which is that concept where we vaccinate as many people as possible so that those who can't be vaccinated for reasons of, allergy or age, our infants, or, immune suppression, for example, folks who are immune suppressed can't receive live attenuated vaccines. So we vaccinate everyone else to provide a bubble of protection for those who can't be vaccinated, and that's called herd immunity or community immunity. But those levels required, the vaccination levels required for herd immunity, are typically in the, somewhere between like the 90 to 95% range. So we're really still falling quite short of that. If we look at the next set of vaccines that our kids get, so they get a big grouping kind of up through kindergarten age, and then they get another set, what I call our adult vaccines, or first adult vaccines, which are teen vaccines, given typically between 11 and 12. They are recommended to get a meningitis vaccine, an HPV vaccine, and a Tdap, first adult Tdap dose. We're doing really pretty well with the meningitis and Tdap vaccines, and you can see the rates there. 86.6% is a national average, 88.9% for Tdap, and then Texas rates in 2017 and 18. But we're really falling short in our HPV vaccine, which is interesting because those three are all recommended at the same time. So there's a whole nother talk I could do about HPV, but we have definite room to improve. So why does it matter? I mean, we're living in a time where we're getting to experience what life is like without vaccines. With vaccines, we have made huge strides in limiting vaccine preventable disease and death. That's gracious, excuse me. I'm fortunate enough that I have never actually seen many of these diseases. Vaccinations for these came about before I began practice, and so I've never seen tetanus um, or meningococcal disease personally. I've never seen that. I've never seen polio, and this is all thanks to vaccines. I mean, you can see here in this table the number of cases before vaccination, and then excuse me, the number of cases after, and the percent decrease that we've seen thanks to vaccines. So we really, vaccines have become kind of a victim of their own success. They've done such a good job. Goodness, I'm sorry. They've done such a good job of getting our disease rates down that people don't really see how serious they can be anymore. And that's part of the problem we're coming up against is that it feels to people sometimes like the vaccine may carry a greater risk than the disease itself, but that's just because we haven't had to live with the disease. But what happens if we stop vaccinating? We had a insight into this the prior year. Last year, we saw the number of measles case spike significantly. Our vaccination rates in certain communities have dropped significantly, and when vaccination rates fall, disease returns. And so we can see that here. Measles was declared no longer endemic, meaning not originating in our country in 2000. And we almost lost that status this past year with the return of measles. We had a huge spike in measles cases, and around the world this was the case, and tens of thousands of deaths, and huge cost to our healthcare system and to families. And so this is what happens if we allow our vaccination rates to fall. So, not only are vaccine preventable diseases really costly on a human scale, but also the societal costs, the financial costs are huge. This is just one vaccine preventable disease, influenza. And this looks particularly at a bad year, a really bad year, which was between 2017 and 18, where we had over 900,000 hospitalizations and more than 80,000 deaths in the US alone from influenza. People, interestingly, tend to think that the flu is no big deal, whereas in fact it really, is one of the most deadly vaccine preventable diseases that we have. And part of that is because it spreads so easily, and part is because we just really do a poor job of vaccinating. And part of it is because the virus itself mutates so quickly. But it was a particularly bad year in 2017 and 18. More typically, we lose between 12,000 and 56,000 people a year. But that's a lot of people. We have, that's, if you think about it in different ways, that's an entire professional football stadium of people gone in 1 year. It's hundreds of, 747 airliners crashing in 1 year. Can you imagine the uproar that we would hear about if in the airline industry if we had that number of deaths from plane crashes? It's interesting. I find it interesting how we think about these numbers, but that's a ton of people lost. And then we have to think about the cost to the healthcare system. Just in this 1 year, this graphic gives you more information on that, but $10.4 billion in direct medical expenses, and that doesn't include lost earnings, work days missed, loss of productivity, et cetera. So it's hugely costly, and this is just one illness. Imagine what it is, if we included all vaccine preventable diseases. And so enter this new virus that we've never seen before. We have no vaccine against, we have no reliable treatments for, and the only way that we can really fight it is to practice, social physical distancing, wash hands, wear masks, etc. This is what life was like before we had vaccines. We are going to fare better than our ancestors did when they encountered vaccine preventable disease, and we will not see nearly the losses that say they did in 1918 from the Spanish flu before there was a flu vaccine. Because we have better medical care, we have better, although not adequate in my mind, public health infrastructure. But this has been obviously hugely costly and impactful for all of us. The direct effects of COVID-19, and this is just as of 2 days ago, I got this information from the CDC, but we've had over 1.8 million illnesses with COVID-19. Hospitalizations, there's not a direct number, but there's sort of a rate of hospitalization. And if you look at all ages, it's about 82 per 100,000. But if you look at those higher risk groups, folks over 65, 254.7 hospitalizations per 100,000 people. Deaths, we crossed that unfortunate milestone of 100,000. So we're at 108,000 plus as of 2 days ago. And costs of medical care are astronomical. These are, estimates based on modeling, but if we have 20% of our population infected, the estimated costs are 163.4 billion. If it goes up to 80% of the population infected, $654 billion. So hugely costly to society. And then in other ways, costly as well. And we've seen a sharp increase in unemployment. Mental health issues are significantly on the climb. Increased rates of abuse and neglect, and widening of our socioeconomic disparities, our food insecurity, educational opportunities. Our patients are scared to come in, and so they're delaying care. And when they come in, they are much sicker than they were before. And we have also, unfortunately, seen decreased rates of routine immunizations. So the immunizations that we have against those childhood illnesses and others, parents are afraid to bring their kids in. And so depending on the vaccine we're talking about, rates have dropped anywhere from 40 to 70%, which is huge. My worries in this are that with that decrease in immunizations, we could see a spike in vaccine preventable diseases. And I can't even imagine what life would be like this fall if we end up sending our kids back to school, hopefully. But if our kids go in unprotected by vaccines, and not only do we have COVID-19, but we head into flu season. And then if we have, another measles resurgence or whooping cough, it would overwhelm the healthcare system and be a tragedy. And so we really, as a medical community, have to get on top of getting those kids caught back up. And then we really need to focus, I think, this fall on vaccinating against what we can vaccinate against. We don't have a vaccine yet for COVID-19, but we do have a flu vaccine. And so it's going to be even more important than ever for people to prevent what they can prevent, so that we can make it through the fall as unscathed as possible. I also worry about our current language about a COVID-19 vaccine. Words, the government program is called Operation Warp Speed. We hear about these things happening, vaccine production happening in, never before seen, with never before seen rapidity. And I worry that that language is going to make people feel like this vaccine is rushed, and it's going to make them worry that it has not been adequately safety tested. And that will be hugely important. We can't rush a vaccine. We have to make sure that it is safe and effective. But we also need to be using language that's going to get people to feel confident about that and get vaccinated. Because if we don't have adequate levels of vaccination, we won't achieve that herd immunity again. And we will continue to struggle with this disease going forward. I do have some hope about the future. I mean, I think we've gotten, there's some good things that will come out of this pandemic that we're in. I think that we're going to see the general population recognize again the importance of prevention, and vaccines as a huge part of that prevention, and see some renewed confidence in science and medicine. Unfortunately, we've lost some confidence for a variety of reasons over the years, but I think people are starting to recognize how important science is, and advancements in science, and how dedicated our medical professionals are to their health. Hopefully we'll see some renewed interest and support for public health. We have in the past sort of underfunded and underappreciated public health, and we're starting to see how massively important that is. And so hopefully we'll improve going forward. And if we're directly speaking to our kids about the importance of, of protecting others, and maybe being uncomfortable by wearing masks or separating from people for a while to keep others safe, our kids will learn a great lesson in acting for the benefit of other people. And I also think we're going to see some changes in our healthcare system for the better. One of the things that I personally have enjoyed in this whole process is getting to do telehealth. It's really convenient for our patients, especially our elderly patients who can't get out of the house, or our patients who live in medically underserved areas where they don't have access to a healthcare provider. They're able to see someone without having to travel hundreds of miles for healthcare. So there's some positive things that are coming out of this. We've seen innovation like never before, and so there are some positives, and I always think it's important to look for those even in these really difficult times that we're in. So with that, I will end, and then I guess we'll save questions for later. But I did want to give you guys, if you have any. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to tell you about my journey to vaccine hesitancy. I'll do that really quickly. But I wanted to give you a way to get a hold of me. So there's emails. I have a website there listed there, which is I have a blog, and I try to use it as a resource to provide information that's reliable and trustworthy for people to go to, both medical people and non-medical, to get vaccine related information. And then I'm on Twitter as well. So just jumping back, because I forgot to tell you about it. I came to this journey of vaccine advocacy really through frustration. I was encountering a lot of pushback on vaccines, and I'm very much prevention focused in family medicine. We take care of people from cradle to grave, we say, so babies to elderly folks, and my goal is to keep you healthy and not have to deal with illness on the other end. So I'm very much focused on mammograms and colonoscopies, and vaccines are a huge part of prevention. They're the greatest public health measure we've ever seen, the most successful public health intervention we have. And so I would offer these, and I don't know if it was because of where I live. Like I said, in the talk, the Northwest, Pacific and Inland Northwest is sort of a hot spot for anti-vaccine sentiment, or if it's the times in which we live, because it's definitely an issue that is growing compared to when I started my training. But it was feeling like a big problem. I was encountering a lot of pushback when I would offer vaccines, and I didn't necessarily feel like I had the tools to address my patients' concerns. In medical school, we get a lot of training on the building blocks of vaccine science, infectious disease, pathophysiology, pharmacology, virology, et cetera. But there's no class really where we sit down and talk about all the questions that people have. What are the toxins in vaccines, and aborted fetal tissue, and all these things that people were bringing to me. I didn't really feel equipped to answer. And that didn't sit well with me. I felt like I was being ineffective, and I felt like I was, in not being able to answer those questions. I was allowing patients to go unvaccinated, and which was harmful to their health and to the community's health. And so I set out to educate myself, to look into the questions that I was getting, trying to be open-minded, and to look at the data and the science behind those questions. And I've realized in doing so that a lot of my partners were experiencing the exact same things. This is a universal problem that we're encountering, and it's not just a US problem, it's a problem around the globe, of vaccine hesitancy. In fact, the World Health Organization named it as one of its top 10 issues confronting the health of the world's people in 2019. And I also realized that while there's a lot of great information out there on websites and and blog posts and podcasts and journals and all sorts of resources. None of it was really in one place that was easily accessible for the busy clinician to be able to access, to be able to help their patients get answers to their questions sort of in real time when they're face to face with that patient in the office. And so I wanted to share what I learned with my partners and with the world, really. And that's how I came about writing a book. And how I came to you guys is that I happened upon a website called Voices for Vaccines when I was writing my book. And it's an amazing website that's really, it's not a medical website. It's run by non-medical folks, lay people who are really advocates for vaccination, but it tells stories, and stories are really powerful. And it tells stories of vaccine preventable diseases, people that have been affected by them. It tells stories of people who have changed their minds about vaccines, who went from being vaccine hesitant or anti-vaccine to pro-vaccine. And I was really interested in that shift in mindset, because it's not easy to confront your own biases and to challenge some pretty strongly held beliefs and to change your mind. And I came across three wonderful ladies, one of whom is Lindsay, keep them here in your group, who told their stories. And it's pretty amazing, not only to be able to confront those biases and to change your mind, but then to do it on a global stage and try to help other people come to an understanding of the importance of vaccines and the community and personal benefit of those. And so I really commend Lindsay for doing what she did. She's a pretty amazing person. So she's how I came to talk to you guys today. And again, I'm just really thankful that you've spent the morning with me, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. And with that, I think I will turn it back over. Jesse, you want to take?
Yeah, so Dr. LaSalle, excellent talk. Lots of jazz hands and claps going on in our gallery view. And I should say that Lindsay says hi. So Lindsay's over on our Facebook. So yeah, she can see and hear you. She's just at work. So she's sort of, I imagine she's on a break or something, sneaking in the video. So, but yeah, so we're going to have an opportunity now to react to Dr. LaSalle's excellent talk from our breakout rooms. The way that's going to work is Abhishek's going to set some things up. You'll see a dialogue appear on your screen to join the room. And I should mention to you that when you join the room, your microphone will be unmuted. So if you decide to join the room, make sure you know that. Otherwise, you could kind of use this as a 10-minute break, and we'll come back in just a bit for Q&A. So any questions that you have, you can post them in the Zoom chat. So with that, Abhishek, let's go ahead and set things up. Is Abhishek still here? Did we lose him? Oh, okay. Oh, you ended up your box was way down on my screen, so I can lose track. All right, and if you're joining us on Facebook Live today, we'll have some discussion and questions right here in the Facebook, so feel free to use the comments for that. Again, any questions that you have for Dr. LaSalle, you can also post those on the Facebook comments, and we'll make sure that they get over here for the Q&A in 10 minutes. We'll see everybody back then. Look, in just a second. All right, everybody, welcome back. We'll have a question and answer session now with Dr. LaSalle about the talk. Let's see. The first question's from Dr. Will Judy. Why do you think that there has been a steady erosion in confidence in vaccines over the years and decade?
Oh, that's a complicated question. I think, I mean, some of what I said before plays a role, that we just have gotten, we've gotten rid of vaccine preventable disease so successfully because of vaccines that people don't remember what those illnesses look like and how devastating they can be. And the generations that do remember are getting older. There's no one really left, not really many people left that remember that 1918, influenza pandemic that killed over 50 million people in 1 year across the globe. I mean, that was huge. So there's that, just sort of not being familiar with what these diseases can do. I think the advent of the internet and social media, television media has played a big role. I mean, these sentiments have been around ever since there have been vaccines. So from 1796, when Edward Jenner introduced the first smallpox vaccine, there's been anti-vaccine sentiment. But in the past, people had to spread their concerns by word of mouth or maybe pamphlets. But now we have internet and social media where we have 24/7 access to information, and someone can just disseminate information to millions of people around the globe with one click of a button. So it's really easy for these anti-vaccine sites and activists who really, it feels like, spend all their time doing this when the rest of us are, trying to take care of people. And this is sort of my side passion project. But it's easy for them to disseminate misleading or false or cherry-picked information. It's the news media, for their part, really has done a bit of a disservice to our efforts in their attempts at balanced reporting, which generally is good. I mean, we want to hear both sides of a story for sure, but in this regard, when they do balanced reporting about vaccines, giving the anti-vaccine side equal voice to the pro-vaccine and scientific side of things, it lends credibility to that argument and makes it seem like it has equal weight, which, the scientific studies, the heft of that weight of those scientific studies is clearly on the side of vaccines being safe and effective. And they also tend to give voice to non-medical people more than they do to doctors and scientists. You have the Jenny McCarthy's of the world who have greater access to news media and talk shows and that sort of thing to spread their message. So it's a complicated issue. Somebody asked, I was looking through the chats about the influence of, I can't remember exactly what it was, but sort of outside forces on this vaccine concern. And in my book, I do talk about a little bit about bots and trolls and the Russian influence in this discussion. There have been studies looking at the effects of these bots are, they're sort of an automated way of spreading a message much more quickly across Twitter and that sort of thing than a human could. And so those have played a role in spreading anti-vaccine messages more than pro-vaccine messages. And then trolls are people who really are just there to sow discord among folks. And I have a quote from a study I'll read you from the American Journal of Public Health. And it says, the study revealed that trolls use more polarizing language, so both pro and anti-vaccine, but polarizing language, linking vaccination to controversial issues in American society, such as racial and economic disparities, using vaccination as a wedge issue to try to promote conflict and division. So there are those outside forces that we have to keep in mind as well. It's not just a homegrown concern. I hope that answered your question.
Excellent answer. I mean, a lot of good information there. And I should mention, we've got a lot of questions, but Lindsay Cheatham's asked a question, and Lindsay gets to go first because she brought you to us. So. Lindsay says, "Hi, Gretchen. Sorry I couldn't join the Zoom meeting. Let's see. How might you learn what impact your book will have for the professionals that use it, and how has it been received, or excuse me, has it been well received by the medical community?"
Yeah, I mean, it's been very well received. And my hope is really in, this book I think is accessible to the non-medical person. It's written towards clinicians because I'm wanting to help us help my partners have greater successes and fewer frustrations in dealing with their vaccine hesitant patients. But I do feel like I wrote it in hopefully a non-jargony, medical jargony way so that your average person, it's accessible to them too. In their discussions with family and friends and people who may be expressing vaccine hesitant attitudes. My other goal, apart from helping people come to a level of comfort and helping my partners in their discussions, is affecting change in our medical educational system. So medical students, residents who are just learning how to have these conversations with patients. And so it's tricky, especially as we are now limited in our ability to communicate with people other than through Zoom meetings and things like that. But I'm trying to develop relationships with, at least locally, hopefully eventually on a broader scale, but in Washington and in Spokane with our medical schools and our residencies, and trying to engage the educators there to develop a curriculum for our students so that they have these answers at hand, that they don't struggle like those of us do who have not had that training to answer the particular questions that their patients are bringing to them.
And let's see here, a question it looks like from Marge Andrews. If a woman is exclusively breastfeeding, what do you think of a modified schedule for vaccinating infants?
So I will do that if it's the only way to get somebody to vaccinate, but I really try to talk folks out of it. Vaccines are recommended at the times that they're recommended and the ages that they're recommended, that they are recommended for a particular reason. So we're trying to vaccinate kids at the ages where they're the most at risk from these diseases, and delaying those vaccines leaves them at risk. And also vaccines often are, they come in series, and that's for a very important reason. Let's talk about the flu vaccine. So the flu vaccine, the first time you get one, after age 6 months, anybody can get 6 months old, anybody can get a flu vaccine. But the first time you get a flu vaccine, you have to get 2 of them. So the first vaccine really just sort of primes the pump for your immune system. It doesn't give you a full immune response. And then it's the second vaccine where your body can recognize that flu. The second vaccine then gets those antibodies really cooking. And so if you're only doing one of the 2 and delaying the second one, you're not providing full immunity, which leaves you at risk, and then also the community at risk, because we are more, I firmly believe that we are more than just ourselves. We're part of a broader community. And so we vaccinate for our own protection, but we also really are vaccinating for the community's protection. So I will do it if my hands are tied. And of course, my ultimate goal is to protect that child. And breastfeeding for sure is super important, and it does lend some immunity to the child, but it's not complete immunity. And so we really need to protect them against these pretty scary childhood diseases.
Let's see here. We're going to have a video question from Brian Cheatham. So Brian, you might have to unmute yourself on your end. There you go.
Other half of Lindsay.
That's right. Thanks so much for your talk. My question is related to the new COVID-19 vaccine as it comes out. Should we have any concern and skepticism with a rushed vaccine like this? I just want to know your thoughts on, the potential of them rushing through the scientific process.
Right. Yeah, I think some skepticism is healthy, I think. We don't want to rush it. And part of the reason this is happening faster than other vaccines, because the process for making a vaccine usually takes 10 to 15 years. So, the fact that we're going to maybe have a vaccine within 12 to 24 months is way faster than we've ever seen. And part of that is because we've had some of the groundwork laid with, attempts at making vaccines against SARS and MERS and these related illnesses that came years before. So we've already got some of that groundwork laid, and that's making things go faster. some of the red tape in these emergency situations is cut away, and we're more efficient at what we're doing, and that's helping things go faster. And those are all good things. But the vaccines, that as they undergo their process of study, they're still going to go through those stages. There's sort of the pre-testing stage, and then there's 3 stages of human testing, and then they continue to study after a vaccine is released. But we have to have transparency, and people are going to need to know, they're going to need to feel confident in what's happening in order to have faith in the vaccine, that it's going to be safe and effective. And so, I don't think, the other thing that's making this so much more happen so much more quickly is that there's international cooperation that's sort of at unheard of levels. I mean, the genetic code for this virus was released within, I think, about a month after China saw it and coded it, and it was released to the scientific community worldwide. And so there's so much sharing of information and cooperation going on that's making this a faster process too. So all of those are really good things. But I think for people to have confidence in this potential new vaccine, there's going to need to be a lot of transparency. And I've heard folks who are more directly involved in vaccine production talking, and these are still going through those normal stages of production and testing. But again, like I said, the language scares me a little bit that we're using this warp speed and rushed, and it's not going to engender a lot of confidence in the vaccine. So we really need to have a PR approach to this vaccine, and we need to make sure we're doing our due diligence to follow the stages of vaccine testing, because vaccines are the most rigorously tested medical interventions that we have, because they are given to people who are healthy. So we have, they've got to be safe. And that's why they usually take 10 to 15 years to develop. So this is just happening a little faster, but they will go through those stages of testing.
I guess a lot of this next question from Roger Lee on Facebook, I guess a lot of it depends on the factors that you just talked about regarding the PR surrounding the COVID-19 vaccine. But his question was, did you believe or hope that due to interest in the COVID-19 vaccines, that the use of flu vaccines will increase in the fall? Could both be given in a cocktail? And in general, would we see potentially less flu numbers because more people will be getting flu vaccines as a result of sort of the discussions?
Yeah, that's my hope. I really hope so. I mean, the flu vaccine is not perfect. It's probably one of our least perfect vaccines that we have, and that's partly because the flu itself mutates so quickly. And we're giving our best guess every year to those strains. And so I hope that people will see, like I said, the value of prevention. They'll recognize the importance to prevent what we can prevent until we have a vaccine for COVID. It won't happen this year where they would be combined. I think that would be a great thing going forward once we have a tried and tested COVID vaccine to combine it with the flu vaccine. I think that would be great. So yes, I mean, that's a big push for me. I'm starting to, at my job here in my clinic, I'm starting to work on how are we gonna get people in for their flu vaccines? Because if we have influenza, which already hospitalizes hundreds of thousands of people and kills tens of thousands of people every year, and we have COVID, it's going to be a mess. And you can get both at the same time. If early on in the COVID coronavirus pandemic, it was still flu season. And so people it has been documented that people can get flu and coronavirus at the same time. One of the things I think will also help us hopefully to see a less severe flu season in the coming months is that if we continue to socially distance and mask and sanitize, I mean, that's a great way to prevent all respiratory viruses. So there's a graph, I don't have it, I wish I had it to show you guys, but there's a graph looking at this current flu season and what happened in right around February, March, when stay-at-home orders went into place, and there's a precipitous drop in flu rates. And that's because we were staying apart and masking. So I think that will help this coming flu season. But we will need to push for the flu vaccines as well to do every little bit we can.
we'll stay on the topic of just communication in general for just 1 second with a question from Eric Schmidt. Do you think that public service announcements showing affected individuals are warranted? That is like the graphic anti-smoking visuals.
Scare tactics. Yeah, I mean, I think we've been seeing that on the news. Earlier on in the pandemic, we were seeing images of ICUs and people hooked up to tubes and wires and face down on their beds and prone position and on all of that. And I think that makes an impact. I still worry that people are, and I see it here. I don't know about you guys where you are, but in my area, I go to the grocery store and more than half the people are not masked. And it's a lot of young people. And I still think people view this as an elderly person's illness and not something that is going to impact them directly. Again, they're not thinking about how, especially young people, they don't think, 2 weeks ahead. And it's hard for them to imagine, the what ifs of life. But I don't think they recognize how their behavior impacts the health of others and the community. So I do think we need a much more vocal PR push for flu, because that, is deadly in and of itself, and for COVID, whether or not pictures particularly, I think pictures of the people that died. I have this view in my mind of a commercial where we start with an image of a child, and we have one child, and then we have another picture and another picture, and another picture, and then there's like hundreds of thousands of little faces or human faces on that screen, and then talk about how these are the people that die every year of the flu, or these are the people that died of coronavirus. And I think that visual can make a big impact.
And this is related. Kimberly had asked a question. I suppose, because given that supplements are often seen as alternatives to vaccines, do you think giving the FDA the legal authority to regulate supplements homeopathic fraud would help with fighting anti-science propaganda?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know that this is going to answer that question, but I'll say something that I just find interesting. Homeopathy is this belief that if you give this tiny little bit of something, it will sort of accustom your body to protect it going forward. And that's exactly what vaccines do. So the disparity between homeopathy, people who believe in homeopathy and not believing in vaccines, it interests me, because that's what we're doing. We're giving this tiny little bit of a protein so that your body can recognize and mount an immune response and keep you healthy. It's an interesting way of thinking that I just don't totally understand. That didn't answer your question, but I'm not sure. I mean, I do think supplements need to be better regulated in general, because, there can be all sorts of things in there that you don't want and not enough of the stuff that you do want. And, there's the U.S. Pharmacy Association. They have oversight over some supplements. And generally speaking, if you guys are getting supplements, I would look for something that says USP certified, because it's going to be a more reliable brand, U.S. Pharmacy Association overseen. But I don't know if it would, how or if it would impact sort of that anti-science, science denial issue we have going on.
Don't come for my sage now. I'm just kidding. I saw some, does anyone have a video comment or question? I saw Samia and Paige sort of bustling in there. Anybody would like to make a comment or question here towards the end, looking at all the boxes? Well, this was just an excellent talk. And an excellent question and answer session. We were so thankful to have you. We will go over to Samia. You can unmute yourself. Yeah, we'll go over to Samia. We'll have one last comment or question from Samia. Go for it.
Thank you, Jeff. Hey, Doc. One of the things I loved your talk. Thank you so much. When my child was in need of the MMR, I knew enough to say, I want you to separate them by 2 weeks and to take out the mercury. And that was done, and I was okay with it. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. So why is it that I was able to do that, but most of the population cannot do that? Why is
Well,
that not an option?
I'm not sure how long ago your kids were at that age where they would get that, but the MMR vaccine in the US right now is you can only get it in combination. You can't get it separated out. I
Aha.
don't know when that changed or
So
why.
that was 20, she's 27 now. So somewhere, yeah,
Yeah.
over 20 years ago. Yeah.
I think the main reason is convenience and minimizing number of pokes is what, and there are multiple vaccines that are in combination now where we have 3 or 4 vaccine preventable diseases protection against in one shot, mostly for the child's comfort. And mercury, so just so you guys know, mercury thimerosal is was a preservative used in vaccines in multi-dose vials. So they're only in vaccines that are in one vial where you'd have to, access that vial repeatedly. And it was there to prevent fungal and bacterial contamination of the vaccine because we don't want to give you a fungal or bacterial contaminant. So its use was very important. What it contained was ethyl mercury, which is different than methyl mercury. Methyl mercury is that neurotoxin that we think about. It's what we find in certain fishes and why pregnant women shouldn't, eat tons of tuna and that sort of thing. So ethyl mercury is much more quickly cleared from the body and does not accumulate like methyl mercury. So just so you know, when there was thimerosal in vaccines, it was ethyl, not methyl mercury. So much safer. In 2001, all vaccines had mercury removed or had thimerosal removed from them. And that was not because there was any evidence of harm, mostly to take it off the table as a reason not to vaccinate. And there are some in the medical community that think that that was maybe not a good idea because all it did was give people the sense that, well, if they removed it, there must have been something wrong with it, whereas there wasn't. And it also made all immunizations except for the multi-dose flu, that's the only one that still has thimerosal in it. All vaccines now have to be individually packaged, which makes them much more expensive. And so, whether or not that was a good move, I don't know, but it is now true that there's no vaccine other than multi-dose flu that have thimerosal in it. And even for the flu shot, many of them are individually packaged. We do have some, you have to, for pandemic situations, you have to have a vaccine that is in larger quantity and more easily administered and less expensive. So it's still important for us to have multi-dose flu because those are the epidemics we see every year. But there is no longer thimerosal in vaccines.
Well, hey guys, I just really appreciate it. We will have to wrap it up. And for those of you, I should mention, we had a poll in our private group about extending the gathering. Some of you might wonder what's going on. So we are slightly extending the gatherings a little bit. We thank you for hanging out with us. If you didn't know that was what was happening, but we do have to wrap it up here. Let's thank Dr. LaSalle with all of our jazz hands and claps. And we hope that you'll come back and speak with us again. Fascinating topic. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, with that, while our musicians get ready for their last song, I should let you know that one of the reasons this happens every week is because of all of the volunteers and, of course, you showing up. It also happens because of your donations. So we still have some ongoing expenses even during this quarantine. We have big plans for the future when we can meet again in person. We like to support our musicians. So if you are on board with the mission of creating secular community here in the Houston area, we'll be posting some donation links down here in the chat window and then also over on the Facebook comments. With that, and we are going to be excited to welcome back here. Yeah, there they are. Corey and Arvin for another number. Let's welcome them back.
Thank you so much for having us. And this next song, this last one, we're going to short version of a Duke Ellington song called In a Sentimental Mood.
Hold on, I was muted. I'm sorry. Lots of claps and applause in our Zoom for you guys. Thank you, Corey and Armin, for coming out and playing for us this morning. We're going to head over to Will Judy now for just a few quick announcements before we wrap up. Take it, Will.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah, very nice job, guys. Wonderful music. Yeah, real quick, Dr. Andrews and I are going to do another COVID Q&A session tonight at 8 p.m. Links are on the private page, the public page, and also emails. Also, I want to announce that there's going to be an Oasis network-wide book club on June the 30th. It's a Tuesday at 7 p.m. It'll be virtual. It's The Founding Myth by Andrew Seidel. Wonderful book about dismantling the myth that the USA is founded as a Christian nation. Terrific book. But again, there's an event on the Houston Oasis page, but I just wanted to mention it here. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Will. And thanks, everybody, for coming. If you join us here next week, we'll be back to talk about the magic of the Polar Express with Ty Frazier. And I should mention, in a few weeks, we're going to have Allison Gill from the American Atheist come and talk about the secular survey. It'll be the first analysis sort of the giant secular survey that took place. That's on June 28th. So always fun stuff happening here at Houston Oasis. We'll hope to see you here next Sunday. Thanks, everybody, and have a great week.